What is going on, guys? So today I'm going to be doing something a lot different than I usually do. I'm going to be talking about a show that I watch, of course. However, I'm not going to be discussing any anime, which is what I not just generally do, but basically 99% of the time am doing. Today I'm going to be talking about Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3, because, well, it's a pretty hot topic, and I have a hot take as per usual for me on how good that episode was. So let's just get straight into this shit. So, when I say that I have a hot take on how good this episode was, I am saying basically, if you have not seen my tweet, which you probably have not because I don't have nearly as many followers as I do subscribers, this episode is the greatest disaster I think the franchise has ever come across, and that includes anything that's happened in the books or, even more importantly, in this conversation in the show. I think it is by far, without any exception or anything coming even remotely close, the worst episode in the entire series, which sounds pretty bad. And a lot of people actually like this episode quite a bit, so will probably disagree with me, but I really think that there was just a lot of hype going into this episode. I think it was the episode that is basically supposed to be the most important in the entire series, and because of that, people were willing to overlook so many of its flaws. They wanted it to be great, so they kind of watched it and just saw it as if it was great, but it was pretty bad, honestly. And there's a lot of factors that contribute to this, and I'm going to get into them, all the problems I had with it. So let me know what you guys think. So for starters, the darkness of the entire episode, I don't really know what was going on with that. It was almost impossible to have any idea what was going on for the entire episode because I guess they just decided they didn't want to use proper lighting. And when I say they decided, you would think that's just me making fun of them. But from my understanding, one of the producers actually said that they used this as an artistic choice because they didn't feel that proper lighting was realistic in a medieval setting like this, which is interesting because, first of all, medieval setting, I mean, what era exactly is it being light at night when there's not street lights around really realistic, I guess? But what are we even talking about in the first place? Not just why are we so concerned with realism when we're talking about a series where there are, I don't know, what do we see this episode? White Walkers and dragons. I don't think realism really is the concern, and I most certainly don't think that the realism has anything to do with the lighting of the episode. I think that everyone would have preferred for it to have been visible on screen. Everything visible on screen, since there was nothing seemingly visible on screen. So that was a pretty weak point as far as I thought that episode went. Another huge problem I had with this episode, which happened at basically the very beginning, was the whole scene with the Dothraki. It was cool how Melisandre was able to light their swords on fire, and it was a little weird how that happened in the first place. But sure, cool. I'm really happy that their swords are on fire. That should be extremely effective against White Walkers, considering based on what we've seen in the series up until this point, if fire even comes into contact with a White Walker, they're just GG. They're getting burned up. It doesn't need to be like a lot of fire to catch on them. No, they just need to come into contact with fire, and they're going to be completely dead. However, unfortunately, this was not nearly good enough of a buff. They send the Dothraki in, and they're dead within like a minute, maybe 2 minutes. Really? Does it really matter? If it was 5 minutes, does it really matter? Because they just committed suicide. And it was pretty clear that was what was going to happen as soon as they started riding off. What were the expectations here? I don't know. It didn't seem like a particularly well thought out strategy. I guess just send in your weakest men was the strategy, but I don't even know if that's the case. The Dothraki are pretty powerful. Are they really the weakest force of this alliance? I don't know. I don't really see any strategical benefit from doing this. And it seemed like they were really just writing off the Dothraki. Like, okay, well, we've had this whole issue where we had to bring the Dothraki over from Essos to Westeros, and there were going to be some political issues with this, not just within themselves, but the way that the people from Westeros would take them fighting for this alliance. So, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just do it. Let's just send them all in, and they're going to be dead within a minute or two. 3 minutes, maybe. And we're just going to act like they never happened, honestly. And that really did feel like just such a plot contrivance with very little reward. I didn't see what the point of it was, except writing off these characters, which I don't even know why it had to happen. I thought they could do something clever with it. But that brings me to my point that I think could really summarize my entire thoughts on this episode. And there's more to it, but this is the biggest thing by far in one sentence. I believe that this episode felt to me like a full-on massive assault on my suspension of disbelief throughout the entire episode. From the beginning, the entire strategical approach of this battle made no sense between sending the Dothraki in to accomplish jack, to say the least. We had catapults which were in front of the barricades and in front of a lot of the soldiers for some reason. I've never seen anything like that in any act of warfare. I mean, generally, you have those things being protected because they're weapons that have long range. And in this particular situation, they're even better than that because they're launching shit that's on fire, which is amazingly effective against White Walkers. But these things are just like on the front lines, which was very weird to see. I've never seen anything like it. There were dragons on the side as well, which did do things. They did. They weren't just useless completely. However, it seemed like they were making weird decisions, such as not attacking the vanguard of the White Walker army, and just generally not spraying fire the entire fight. They would launch some bombs, and they would take out a great, fantastic, super high amount of White Walkers, of course, because their ability is overpowered and it counters White Walkers. But they didn't seem to be using this ability very consistently at all. Really, it should have been like 80 minutes of just dragons raining down fire on White Walkers, but they only seem to use it for like 5 seconds at a time every few minutes. So that was shocking, to say the least. Then we have the Unsullied, who not just were behind the catapults for the most part, but I mean, we have Grey Worm sitting on the front lines, and after the Dothraki commit suicide, we have the White Walkers charging up. They come next to meet the Unsullied army, and Grey Worm is standing once again, at least as far as we can tell, in the vanguard. I guess he could be sitting at the front of a particular unit where it's stationed behind a lot of other ones, but that didn't seem to be the case. When the White Walkers were charging up on him, he put on his helmet as if he was about to have them right on top of him. And then as they're charging, we see him, and as soon as they make contact with the Unsullied army, it's like him being prepared to fight. So I can't imagine that wasn't supposed to be him on the front lines. And then speaking of those front lines, the White Walker army comes into contact with it and completely overwhelms it. So not just should all of the Unsullied be dead there, but at the very least, Grey Worm should be dead basically immediately. But there was this weird thing going on with this episode where we have this scene where the Unsullied are bracing themselves for the White Walkers, and then they get overwhelmed, and then we cut over to another scene, and 5 minutes go by, we see all this stuff happening, and then we go back to this other scene where it's like the Unsullied are preparing to come into contact with the White Walkers for the first time again, just like we saw 5 minutes ago. And then they do, and they get overwhelmed again. And then we cut over to another scene for 5 minutes, and then we come back to another scene where it's the Unsullied getting prepared for the White Walkers coming in to attack, and it's the same exact thing we just saw 5 and 10 minutes ago. I don't know what was going on. It was like when I make a video, and for some reason the clips that I am putting together are out of order, but I just put them in the order that I created them chronologically, and it obviously makes for a weird situation in the video. I've never uploaded anything like this because that would be strange, but sometimes something like that happens, and that's what it felt like was going. Like they didn't rewatch what they created, and the Unsullied scene just happened three or four times. It was very strange, and it felt weird and made no sense at all whatsoever. And I really do not know how Grey Worm could possibly be alive in a situation such as this. Getting back to the dragons, I thought that the whole dragon fighting between Jon Snow and Daenerys and the Night King was so bad. I mean, it looked cool, it was great, but there were a lot of problems with it. For example, I seem to remember that when the dragons were fighting each other, the only colored fire I saw was blue. I didn't see a single blast of red fire, and I'm sure there was. I'm sure they used their fire at some point. But really, it seemed like the Night King's dragon, Viserion, was just constantly using his fire, which he rightfully should be because it's super overpowered ability, obviously. I mean, as a dragon, what are you expecting? But the other two were just not using their fire so much, which is weird, considering that with Viserion now being an undead, if they were even to scratch him with fire, he should just be dead. He should just immediately be engulfed in flame, basically, and be dead. But that would be, too quick. So, of course, these dragons are going to be limiting their fire use significantly. And even when they do use it, it's not going to make contact with Viserion. So that just seemed like a disaster. And even beyond that just ridiculous plot contrivance of them just not using fire and it never being effective or anything when Viserion's is ultra effective nonstop. The Night King and Jon had this like one-on-one dragon battle for a really good amount of time, maybe 5 minutes of screen time, seriously. And Dany was just nowhere to be found. Like, I don't know what was going on. I understand that they got split up and stuff. They were very confused flying around in the mist or whatever you want to call it. But, like, they're just fighting for minutes on end. And she's nowhere to be found. She doesn't do anything in this time. She's just off screen, accomplishing nothing. It was so crazy. I mean, I remember when I was first considering how Viserion would play in this battle, when he was first revived as an undead, I thought, well, okay, that's obviously going to be a huge benefit to the Night King's army. I mean, that's amazing. They go from not having a dragon to having a dragon. That's a huge difference. But the amount of difference between having one dragon and two, I mean, it's pretty overwhelming. So they decided, okay, well, then we're just going to have a one-on-one between the Night King and Jon Snow. And Dany's just going to be basically teleported out of the series in that time because, obviously, that would be a pretty big beatdown if it was 2v1 dragons. So she just wasn't allowed to participate at that point for some reason. Okay, and then moving on to the character problems I had with this episode. First, talking about Tyrion being in the crypt. They have this whole scene where Tyrion says, he wants to be on the battlefield, and that he was extremely effective in the Battle of Blackwater, which was so true. And when I watched this, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, you tell him, Tyrion. That's right, you were amazing in the Battle of Blackwater. Get him. I thought that was it. Like, okay, so he's going to be on the battlefield now, and he's probably going to drop some serious strategies like he did. And I thought that was going to be awesome. It was going to be just like that great scene, the Battle of Blackwater. I thought that's what we were getting. And then it's, nope, just sit in the crypt. This isn't the same thing. I don't know what was particularly different about it, except that the stakes were higher and they had a worse chance. But what does that have to do with anything? Shouldn't that just mean that they need him to be up there giving out tactics even more so? It was just so bad. I mean, what was the point of keeping Tyrion down there? I don't think that it made the realism any better. I think that was unaffected. So why keep a character like that out of this situation? I was baffled. I was baffled, to say the least. And then my final criticism of this episode was the character deaths that happened and didn't happen. I thought that there should be a significantly higher amount of character deaths, but at the very least, if they're going to have a lot less than they should, I was hoping that some of them would be more meaningful, but seemingly they were all horrendously bad. Like, really, I was shocked by how bad these character deaths were. It was crazy. I mean, starting off with Jorah, yes, of course, Jorah was going to die. That was pretty obvious, in my opinion. This character, I mean, was really a fantastic one from the beginning to the end of the series. And the way he died was so lackluster. It was just not good. I mean, of course, everyone knew he was going to be defending Daenerys when he died, and that's exactly what happened. But it just seemed like, with all the other characters we're seeing surviving things that make no sense, like Jon Snow being surrounded by White Walkers, and Grey Worm being dead, basically. I mean, it didn't make any sense how he could possibly be alive. Jorah just gets overwhelmed by a few White Walkers and then dies like 30 seconds before it's all over. So if he would have lasted 30 more seconds, it would have been good. But he's dead because we all knew he was going to be dead, and they're just like, yeah, we got to kill him. Let's just fucking end it in whatever way possible. Let's just end it for him. So that was really terrifyingly bad, but it happened. Theon Reek's death was a complete disaster. Honestly, I don't even really want to get into that until later because that comes off of another point. Lyanna Mormont's death was pretty bad, in my opinion. And really, not even the death, just the whole situation that happened there. I thought it was weird that she was fighting in the first place, especially when Tyrion's not fighting. That's weird. That's really weird. But I can definitely get behind that, especially with the way her character has been throughout this series since she was introduced. But, I mean, so we have her get just slapped across the place by a giant. First of all, how are you even alive? Okay, that was weird. That was really weird that she was even alive. I remember when it happened, I'm like, with my friends, I yelled like, holy shit, is she just dead? Is that it? Like, oh wow, this is Game of Thrones. This is brutal as ever. Okay, that's intense. And then she's not dead, which is weird. But so she gets up and charges at the giant, and it picks her up, and she just fucking kills it. Like, the drama was so ridiculous that she had this opportunity to kill a giant. And I watched the after episode thing where you get to like hear what the producers have to say about this video or this episode. And we thought this was a great opportunity for one of the smallest characters in the series to kill one of the largest characters. What does that mean? That's just what happened. Like, that's not, there was no reason for that to happen. I don't understand. That seemed terrible. And then she comes back as a White Walker and doesn't actually do anything. You just see her be revived as a White Walker and nothing happens. So that was cool. That was really bad. Seriously, really bad in my opinion. And then lastly, Melisandre's death, which, again, we all knew this was going to happen. She literally says in the beginning of the episode that that's going to happen, which was weird in my opinion. Why even tell us that? Why? So we just know? We just know she's dead? And I mean, I'm pretty happy with her being dead, really. Who could really like her? But, like, I thought it was pretty strongly implied and expected that when she said that she was going to die basically sacrificing herself in some way. Maybe even with the whole Lord of Light situation where he is able to perform all these miracles when there are sacrifices, like human sacrifices made. Maybe she would die in some kind of sacrifice to use his power to save the world. That would have been logical and definitely better than what happened. But instead, we get this whole thing where the battle ends. It's a complete miracle, which we're about to get into. And then she just... I don't know. What happened? She just takes off her necklace and walks like 50 feet ahead of some people and dies? Like when when she didn't do anything to make her tired, or I don't know. You tell me, what happened there? Why? Like she just figured she doesn't deserve to be alive anymore, and how does that even, how do you just die? I don't know. That was I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when that happened. That was pretty crazy. But chronologically, that's not even the last thing that happens in that episode for sure. The last important thing that really does happen is, of course, the thing that is a lot of people's problem. A lot of people have contention with the way the Night King was killed. Now, that's the last thing I'll be getting into, really, regarding the episode. So, basically, the way I see it is Arya killed the Night King, right? Okay. If I had to vote on a character to kill the Night King before this happened, Arya would probably be the one. I mean, I want her to do other things like kill some people in King's Landing, you know, in these upcoming episodes. But if I had to pick someone to kill the Night King specifically, it would be Arya. So that was a good decision, in my opinion, at least for me. I could see you disagreeing with that, but that's not really the point here. But the way that it happened was so amazingly bad, I just couldn't believe it. I've said that multiple times, but it really was shocking, considering this is like my second favorite series of all time, behind One Piece, of course. And that was, wow. Like, every episode of Game of Thrones I see, I'm constantly saying I cannot believe how high the quality of almost every scene in every episode is. But then something like this happens in one of the most crucial points of the entire series? Really? Like, Arya's just going to teleport next to the Night King? And I mean, did we all see how he was surrounded? When I was watching this episode, I was watching with my two roommates. And I remember when we were watching the Night King walk up to Bran, and they have this stare down where it goes from Bran to the Night King, to Bran to the Night King, to Bran to the Night King. We were just actually laughing at this point. We were laughing our asses off. We thought it was super fun. Like, what is going on with the Night King? Why is this being so dramatic? It was crazy how dramatic it was. And then Arya just comes out of nowhere and one-shots the Night King. No problem. She gets stopped for a second and then just stabs him and he's dead. Like nothing ever happened. We never hear a word from the guy, which he probably can't talk, which is a huge problem, by the way. Something I could make an entire video about the seemingly biggest threat of the entire series being a character that can't talk, so he's not really that interesting, which is unfortunate, but not even that important right now. That was just a really bad way to kill the Night King, in my opinion. I thought about this too, and they could have had a lot better of an ending, in my opinion. It still would have been bad, but what if? So when the Night King kills Theon, which was just worthless, the way he went out was nothing horrendous, I guess, but it was lame. It wasn't exciting at all. They just seemed to be killing him off, just like with Jorah. But what if? So when he got stabbed, he's on the ground, And it feels like he's going to do something. Like, the Night King was concentrating on him quite a bit to make sure that he was dead. Because it seemed like he was about to accomplish something, which would have been cool. But as we know, he actually just dies. He has this weird... We watch him just really slowly die. And it wasn't exciting or anything, so that was weird. But what if, maybe as like a last act of desperation, he could have grabbed the Night King's leg and just... It wouldn't have really amounted to anything. He just would have been just trying to defy him one last time. Which would have been cool because, like, his character has always just been so desperate in general. He's just been always getting the short end of the stick since he became Reek, really. And this would have just been... Maybe he could have even been crying or something. Like, it was a desperate attempt to do nothing. He just didn't want to give up right there. He grabs his leg. The Night King now has his focus on Theon. And then Arya pops out of nowhere. Like, okay, yes, at least there's going to be the teleporting, which is really bad. But, I mean, at least something would have been exciting. Kind of. Like, Theon would have had some credit for that ending. So, and I don't even know if I would have been so critical if that's how it would have gone down. Of the teleporting. Which was so bad. But I think that I would have had a different opinion, to say the least. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this episode. I actually am really excited for the final 3. I am kind of just going to take this series for what it's worth and try to ignore what I just witnessed. I think it was really bad, but what are you going to do? I mean, that's fine. I'm going to be excited for the next 3 episodes. Hopefully we get back to something that actually makes sense and isn't a full-on assault of my suspension of disbelief. Maybe in the last 2 episodes, 1 episode, we get back into the politics that Game of Thrones is so popular for. I'm really not a fan of just this crazy-ass warfare. Like, yeah, it's cool, but that's not what Game of Thrones is about, and I hope that we get at least an entire episode dedicated to figuring out how we're going to deal with this whole situation. How is the Game of Thrones going to be resolved in terms of the politics, which is what the show has always really been about. The only thing that I'm a little skeptical and worried about is I don't understand how we're even going to act like there's going to be a real battle, considering Dany still has a dragon. At least. I mean, I thought that Jon's dragon died, but I've heard a few people say, we didn't really see the death on screen. I mean, is it really dead? I think it is. I think. Otherwise, what was it doing at the end of that battle? But assuming she only has 1, how is the Lannister army going to stand a chance? I mean, it's weird how this dragon, all these dragons, have this weird thing where when they're shown doing things, they're so unbelievably overpowered, it's like, this is going to break the show. They're so overpowered, nothing stands a chance against them. But then when they're actually being used, they just have no common sense. They just have no idea what they're doing. So I don't know. I think that a dragon should literally be able to wipe out an entire army, despite the fact that the Lannisters have developed some kind of weapon to take them down. It shouldn't, I mean, be that useful at all. Like, it was ridiculous that that was even effective in the last time we saw it used. So, whatever. But really, a dragon should wipe out that entire army. So, I guess we'll just see. If it's a close battle, I'm going to be disappointed. But hopefully, something happens like Jaime killing Cersei. That's really all I'm asking for. I think that if that happens, which is something I've been asking for like 4 seasons, then that will make up for everything we saw in this episode. So, hopefully that happens. That's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Remember to leave me a comment letting me know what you thought about this video. I I've never really made a video like this on my channel where I talk about something that's not anime related or just not related to a show, like some kind of weird channel kind of video. So maybe I got a few different viewers or something. Probably not. I'm probably not going to get picked up by the algorithm or anything. But also, if you are just a subscriber to my channel and you do watch Game of Thrones, hopefully you did enjoy it. Hopefully you like when I branch out and do a video like this. This was a particularly passionate topic for me because I was so disappointed, so I absolutely had to make a video like this one. With that all being said, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, a great week, and I will talk to you guys on Friday.